Greetings, fellow travelers, vagrants, explorers, wildlanders, and welcome to episode 67 of the Retro Wildlands. My name is Nomad, and this is my gaming podcast where I like to share my thoughts and experiences with a video game that I have discovered or rediscovered while roaming the gaming wildlands. Thank you very much for tuning into the show today. The gaming wildlands are a vast landscape and ripe with things to discover, and those discoveries are always that much sweeter to come across when you're able to join us. Dee Dee, our canine expedition leader, is especially glad to see you today. Go ahead and find your way over by the campfire, my friends. The cooler is well stocked, the fire is strong, and we have one heck of an adventure awaiting us. Dee Dee will be around to administer the customary sniffing of the leg, so as usual, no sudden movements while our expedition leader takes in where you've been lately and silently judges you. Dexter, Dee Dee's brother from another dog mother, is out patrolling the perimeter of the campsite today. He's been on high alert lately as there's been reports of gang activity around these parts. According to our sources, the mysterious Gang X is roaming the wildlands, and reports are coming in that they're capturing people's girlfriends. It's pretty random, I know. Recently, we've received word that a gal named Sylvia has been taken and is being held at the top of the Devil's Temple. Dee Dee and Dexter think we should see about rescuing her, and I, for one, am all for it. People can't just go around kidnapping people and dumping them at the top of temples. So, in order to hold these bastards accountable, I say we mount a rescue attempt. But before we head out, Dee Dee is going to be getting us all prepared by teaching us all the ancient art of Kung Fu. On today's episode, we're checking out a video game that was one of the 17 original launch titles that came out on or around October 18th, 1985. When the Nintendo Entertainment System was launched here in North America. Which was, holy crap, 39 years ago. I was just over a year old when the NES launched. Wow. That actually makes my back hurt just saying that out loud. Nevertheless, not only did the world receive the treasure that was the Nintendo Entertainment System, we were also given some incredible video games to go along with it. Some were better than others, of course, and while I didn't get a chance to play them all, I've been fortunate enough to partake in some of the original titles that the system did have on offer. Super Mario Bros. And Duck Hunt are the two that immediately come to my mind, but there were also the likes of Excitebike, Hogan's Alley, and 10-Yard Fight. But whenever I think about the original 17, my mind always goes to Kung Fu. I can't remember exactly where I played Kung Fu originally. My grandmother had an NES, but I can't recall if that's where I played this game. When I think back to this game, I do remember it fondly. The concept was simple, the gameplay was fun, and the challenge was very real. But beyond all that, there was something about this game that stuck with me over the years, even if I didn't actually play it all that much. And really, the idea of being able to play as a Kung Fu master was probably all I needed as a kid to get vested in this game. I mean, what little kid didn't want to rough up some bad guys like Chuck Norris or Bruce Lee? Kung Fu on the NES allowed us all to put ourselves in the role of an action hero, defeating enemies with punches, kicks, and overall badassery. And regardless of whether or not we succeeded in the game, each session was a great time. After playing this game as a kid, I never picked this game back up again. That was until recently, though, when I grabbed a copy of Kung Fu from my local retro gaming store. When I looked at the cartridge and stared at the sticker, I felt a pull to throw on my Kung Fu uniform and see if this game was as fun and as challenging as I remember. And I wanted to see, now that I'm much older, if I had the chops to actually beat this game on its own merits. When it was all said and done, not only did I have a great time playing this game again, I learned a ton about this game and its history, and I cannot wait to share it all with you today, my friends. We're going to slot this game into our NES and go on a Kung Fu fighting journey that's bound to bring you NES veterans some sweet, sweet nostalgia. And if for some reason you've somehow never played this game before, I think you'll want to after we're done here. Now, if you're new to the show, I like to kick things off by chatting it up with you all first and give everyone a peek behind the scenes here in the Retro Wildlands. Depending on what's on my mind, I like to share what's going on with the show, what's happening in my personal life, talk about what games I might be playing, or whatever else I feel like dropkicking into this here microphone. I'll also use this time to read and respond to any comments we received about Kung Fu from the Retro Wildlands community as a way to set the stage for the main part of the episode. Now, if none of that interests you and you're just here for the Kung Fu experience, no worries. You can skip ahead about 15-20 minutes, and you should get into the game talk. I usually try to keep our catch-ups to about that time frame, but in case I don't, or you want to know exactly where you need to go if you don't want to stick around, I will be putting timestamps in the show notes so you know exactly where you need to go to start getting into that Kung Fu experience. However, I do encourage you to stick around if you have the time. It's going to be a fantastic time as we chit-chat, talk some video games, and your fellow Wildlanders will get a chance to sound off their thoughts to the rest of us. And I can't think of a better way to get our expedition combat ready. So, without further ado, let's get into our opening segment that I like to call Campfire Catchup. When I was writing the script for our catch-up today, I found myself staring out my home office window looking at all the snow that continues to fall here in Ohio. On one hand, I should be fortunate to be able to live somewhere where I get to experience all 4 seasons. But, on the other hand, I am so friggin' tired of the cold temperatures, the gray sky, and the overall blah feeling the weather's been bringing over the last few months. And I know, I'm sure some place out there is far worse off than my little town here in Ohio is. But man, I miss being outside and not feeling my face hurt. The one thing I really miss doing is taking Dee Dee and Dexter out for a long walk. The temperatures have been so cold around here that even putting sweaters on the dog doesn't seem to keep them warm enough. Justine and I are actually going to head to the pet store after I finish recording this to see about getting our boys some boots that they can wear outside. While I'm looking forward to how ridiculous they'll look, I'm more looking forward to getting them outside again to do things other than just poop in the backyard. Both our boys have been extremely mopey, so here's hoping that this will put a little pep in their step. And as far as myself goes, I could absolutely use a good long walk. If I'm not cooped up in my own home, I'm at work in the office. I've honestly started to forget what the sky looks like, and it's made me a little moody myself. But I will say things are still very busy around these parts, and while the weather itself does suck and it's bringing my mood down a little bit, I have been fortunate enough to be able to partake in several different things. One of which is being included in several podcasting projects that I'm really excited to tell you all about. So over the course of the last month or so, I have been fortunate enough to be a guest on 3 different podcasts. First, I jumped on the Gaming Together podcast, where host Nave and I talked about Castle Crashers, a side-scrolling hack-and-slash game that originally came out in 2008 on Xbox Live, for those that remember that awesome service when the 360 was around. Nave and I talked about our personal histories, how we preferred to play the game, and went into the absurdity of the presentation in this episode. It was the first time I was on the Gaming Together podcast, and I had a great time. Castle Crashers itself was very fun, and I'm hoping to go back to it later this year. The second show that I was on was Pixel Project Radio, where host Rick Firestone and I did a deep dive into the narrative-based adventure known as Detroit Become Human. I am pretty sure I mentioned this last episode, but as of this recording, all 3 episodes Rick and I did together on Detroit are now live and available for your listening pleasure. It's not often that I get to discuss a game's deeper themes in detail, so it was very fun to be able to join Rick on his show. Even though he and I were pretty critical of the game in some spots, Detroit will remain one of my favorite games and gaming experiences, so I highly recommend checking that out if you haven't already. And a game that vast is always fun to discuss, so I would love your thoughts if you do decide to partake. The last podcast that I was fortunate enough to be a guest on hasn't published the episode at the time of this recording, so I will keep that one in my back pocket for the time being. I will say, it was covering a game that I've already talked about here on the Retro Wildlands, and it was fun to discuss it in a more free-form sort of format. When that episode goes live, I will absolutely let you all know over on our social media pages. And I'll also make it a point to put links to my guest appearances on Gaming Together and Pixel Project Radio in the show notes if you want to check those out. If you have the time, it would be awesome if you could, if for no other reason than to show some support for some awesome people who, for some reason, find value in what I bring to their shows. Beyond appearing on several other podcasts since we got together last, I've been hard at work on my gaming backlog. I am pretty proud of the progress I've made so far this year, but I find myself in an interesting spot with regards to the games that I am playing. In my mind, I want to be able to turn the games that I play into content for the Retro Wildlands in some capacity, whether that's talking about the games on the show or creating a video on them for our YouTube channel. But a lot of that takes time that I really don't have to spare lately while I juggle everything else going on in life. Still, I've been collecting my thoughts and ideas on paper, so there may be some additional content coming down the line. One thing that worries me, though, is how interested some of you might be in the games that I've been playing lately. In an effort to complete some of the shorter games on my backlog, I've been playing some lesser-known indie games that don't really have much meat on the bone when it comes to talking or discussion points. I still want to highlight them somehow, so I'm working on some fun ways to do that. Maybe I'll make some videos that are just a little bit shorter, or maybe I'll just turn them into 1-minute YouTube shorts. We'll just have to see. As of this recording, though, I have completed 7 games this year. One of the more recent ones I completed, I ended up playing on my PlayStation Vita, and that game was called Back in 1995. Originally released in 2016, this game is a throwback to PlayStation 1 era survival horror games. It intentionally looks like a PS1 game, complete with the blocky graphics. The game itself also has several CRT filters to give it a very retro vibe, and I find that fairly appealing. While this game is a great homage to what has come before it, it absolutely plays like an old PS1 survival horror game, complete with slow movements and tank-style controls. Mileage may vary for most people, but if you are a fan of survival horror games in general, it's an interesting game, and I think you should try it if you see it on the cheap. The game wasn't inherently scary or anything, and the gameplay wasn't exactly memorable, but the underlying message that the developer was trying to relay in the story did resonate with me for a little bit. Certainly not the best game I've ever played, but I am glad to have given Back in 1995 a try. The most recent game that I completed as of this recording was a game that I decided to download completely on a whim. And that game was Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon. Originally DLC for Far Cry 3 back in 2013, this standalone experience has always been one of my favorites. This game is an homage to 1980s action movies, and your goal as the player is very simple. Kill the bad guys, get the girl, and save the world. Blood Dragon isn't too long of an experience, but boy is it a fun one. The soundtrack by Power Glove is a perfect blend of 80s action music, taking inspiration from movies like The Terminator and Predator. The gameplay is what you'd expect from an open-world first-person shooter, but it's the story, presentation, and stellar voice acting that really drives this experience home. I originally played this on my 360 back in the day, but I'm glad I gave this another run-through. It was very fun, and I highly recommend it to any first-person shooter fans out there, or any of you that just love a good 80s action flick. I really wish we had more experiences like this one, if I'm being honest. Now, if you have even a passing interest in what games I'm playing, what other podcasts I may be a part of, or you just want a little gaming spice added to your day, be sure to check out the Retro Wildlands on social media if you haven't already. I try to stay relatively active over on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky, so if you search the Retro Wildlands on any of those platforms, you should be able to find us. I'd love to have you over there, and our social platforms are the best way to get a hold of me personally, so if you want, be sure to give us a follow. As an added bonus, being part of our social media pages gives you the ability to have your questions or comments about any upcoming games or topics I'm going to cover read and responded to on the show. So if that's something that interests you, be sure to follow the Retro Wildlands on your favorite social platform. Alright, and with that, I think we have done all the catching up that I want to do for this episode. It is time we transition to the reason that you're all here today. It is time to talk about Kung Fu for the original Nintendo. We had a couple comments come in from the community about Kung Fu, so let's run through those, shall we? First up, we have the Overwhelmed Gamer, who chimed in over on our Retro Wildlands Facebook page. They said, "I loved this one. I received this one Christmas Day. Same Christmas I received my NES. I was a huge fan of the arcade game and was pleasantly surprised how good of a port this was." That is awesome, my friend. You almost never forget your best Christmas gifts, especially if they're video games. Going into this game myself, I had no idea that it was a port of an arcade game. I'll talk a bit about it in the meat of the episode, but I'm really glad to hear that the NES game is a good port of the arcade original. After doing the research I did on this game, I am very eager to try the arcade version. Guess I'm gonna have to set sail on the high seas for that one, since I have never ever seen the arcade version in person. Our next comment comes from Masked Keaton, who dropped a comment about Kung Fu over in the SuperPod Lounge Discord server, which I will have a link for in the show notes if you're interested in joining up. Keaton said, "Heck yeah! This is one of those comfort games from my youth that I owned and played the heck out of. I don't have any specific memories or stories about it, but it's a fun time. And how about that evil laugh?" Jameson, who's the host of the Bar Silence podcast, by the way, talks on their Streets of Rage episode about how this game is one of the first beat-em-ups, and my mind is blown, but he's right. I too, Keaton, was blown away by the fact that Kung Fu was basically the first ever beat-em-up game. Rick from the Pixel Project Radio podcast had mentioned this to me as well the day that I had learned about it. This game already did a great job of making me feel old, but this just cements it all in. Oh, and that evil laugh was almost as infuriating as the dog from Duck Hunt. Anytime I would lose to a boss in Kung Fu and I had to hear that laugh, I always remember gritting my teeth. What an asshole. Our last comment comes from Thrak, who is one of the hosts of the 3DO Experience podcast. They dropped a comment in the SuperPod Lounge as well, and Thrak said, "Kung Fu is a game I discovered in my NES collecting days and I dug it. I still like it after beating it finally a few years back. A simple pick up and play experience for anyone into simple action games with a bit of strategy. A bygone game from a bygone era." Well said, Thrak, and if I had to sum up my own feelings regarding Kung Fu, it would be exactly this. I still had a good time playing this game even after all these years. Kung Fu isn't the deepest game or anything, but the simplicity makes the game very approachable. You're probably going to get your face bashed in quite a bit though, but as you learn the enemies and how best to use the moves that you're given, you quickly figure out how best to approach most situations. This game is as close to a pure retro experience as you're going to get, and that is the best part in my mind. Absolutely 100% a bygone game from a bygone era. A huge thank you to the Overwhelmed Gamer, Thrak, and Masked Keaton for taking the time to drop their thoughts and memories about Kung Fu. If you, dear listener, want to get in on the action for any upcoming episodes of the show, make sure you follow us on social media or join the SuperPod Lounge Discord server. While I'm writing the script for the next show, I'll put a call out for comments, and that is your ticket to get read on the show. It's always fun hearing from you all, so definitely check us out if that is something that you would like to partake in. Originally released with the launch of the Nintendo Entertainment System in North America on or around October 18, 1985, Kung Fu is a side-scrolling beat-em-up game where players take control of Thomas, a kung fu expert who's on a quest to rescue his beloved Sylvia from the mysterious Gang X, who has kidnapped her for some reason, stashed her at the top of the Devil's Temple, a place with 6 floors, all of which are crawling with bad guys. From knife throwers to stick fighters to the notorious grippers, these guys will stop at nothing to see Thomas defeated. Using all of Thomas's skills, it's going to be up to us to mount a rescue, all while kicking the teeth of anyone who tries to get in our way. Do we have what it takes to reach the top floor of the temple? Or will we be beaten down and humiliated for our efforts? That, my friends, is going to be completely up to us. So let's gear up, Wildlanders. Let's don our kung fu attire, tie on our black belts, and maybe throw on a headband for good measure. It's time to teach the bad guys a lesson, and that lesson is you do not mess with a kung fu master's girl. Unless you want to get jump kicked in the face, which is something we can absolutely arrange. One of the things that I really enjoy about older video games is how focused and simple they used to be at times. While I certainly appreciate games nowadays that let you explore a vast open world or have piles of content like unlockable skins, weapons, dots on a map you could go explore, and all sorts of other goodies, there's something special about a game that has a singular purpose and gives the player a singular objective. And anymore now, games are great for throwing the player headfirst into a sprawling narrative or tossing us into worlds that we might have only experienced in a movie or a book. After a long day at work or getting lost in the day-to-day in general, sometimes I find myself craving those simpler experiences. And of all the video games that I've played in my youth, Kung Fu on the original Nintendo embodies everything I sometimes look for in a gaming experience. I've probably mentioned it a dozen or so times up to this point, but my original Nintendo experiences were largely thanks to the NES that was at my grandmother's house. Growing up, Grandma did a pretty decent job keeping a healthy supply of NES cartridges around, but for the life of me, I cannot remember where I originally played Kung Fu. If it was there at Grandma's, if it was over a friend's house, or somewhere else. But even though I can't tell you where I've played this game before, I can tell you how I felt while I was playing this game. I always had fun, and even though I didn't get very far, the game somehow made me feel powerful. I mean, jumping on top of a Koopa or a Goomba was one thing, but there was something just, I don't know, cathartic maybe, about punching a digital bad guy in the teeth and then jump kicking his pal in the chin. Now, please don't get me wrong, I wasn't one of those crazy kids growing up with a penchant for violence or anything, but every kid loved playing pretend, and there's nothing more wholesome than wanting to be a good guy who takes out the bad guys and maybe even gets the girl at the end. When I wasn't outside swinging a stick around pretending that it was a sword or roughhousing with my cousins, video games let me use my imagination in some cool ways, and Kung Fu was one of those games that really resonated with me in that way. But over time, I would leave this game behind, and fairly frequently I would lose track of its existence. But once I saw this game again at my local retro gaming store, the few memories I did have with it came flooding back, and a genuine smile quickly spread across my face. All told, I think I've put maybe an hour or two into Kung Fu over the course of a Saturday afternoon recently, and I had a pretty damn good time replaying this game. Afterwards, I spent some time researching the game a little bit and looking into Kung Fu's development history, which, after learning what I did, made me want to fire the game up again and get a little bit more game time in. I had a good time playing and learning about this game, and I'm hoping you do too, as we give the spotlight to a video game that can be best described as it was by one of our community members, a bygone game for a bygone era. So, before we slot this game into our NES and see about taking the fight to the bad guys, we need to peel back the layers a little bit and see exactly what it is that we're working with. So, what is this game? Kung Fu on the original Nintendo was classified as a side-scrolling beat-em-up game that was released with the NES on or about October 18, 1985. Players take control of Thomas, a Kung Fu expert. One day, he and his gal Sylvia were attacked by a gang of unknown individuals. While Thomas was trying to fight them off, and most likely trying to impress his gal while he did it, because that's sure as hell what I would do, Sylvia found a way to get herself captured during the fighting. After the gang flees, Thomas finds a letter that we can assume the gang wrote in advance. Left behind by a man named Mr. X, the letter reads,
"Your love Sylvia is in our custody now. If you want to save your dear Sylvia's life, come to the Devil's Temple at once. 5 sons of the devil will entertain you."
Several thoughts, I'm sure, were going through Thomas's mind here. First, why did they target him and his gal? Second, how do they know their names? Have they been watching them? And third, how are these 5 sons of the devil going to entertain him? One would assume he has to fight them, but perhaps they mean to entertain him some other way. Checkers, maybe? Or perhaps a game of Parcheesi? Oh, okay, that is a terrible joke. But regardless of why, Thomas is determined to get his girl back and take out anyone in his way. And honestly, when you step back and look at it, it is the perfect setup for a video game. Now, when I was growing up, this was it. This is all I ever knew of Kung Fu. Where the game came from and what it was really based on was lost on me. But the more I looked into this game and its origins, the more interesting things I found. So, before we slide this game into our NES, I wanted to take a moment and highlight some of my findings. Maybe these things are common knowledge for some, but for me, it was a wild time learning about all this for the first time. So right off the bat, I learned that Kung Fu on the NES was a port of an arcade game. That game was called Kung Fu Master, but it was also known as Spartan X in Japan, which was originally released in arcades in Japan in 1984, the year that I was born. It was developed and published by Irem. Pretty sure it's Irem, so we're going to go with that. Developed and published by Irem, then later distributed by Data East when it came to North America. The game itself was loosely inspired by 2 fairly popular Kung Fu movies. One of the movies was called Meals on Wheels, which was actually called Spartan X in Japan. It starred Jackie Chan playing the role of a man named Thomas. Sylvia is also featured in the movie. I did read that Thomas in Kung Fu for the NES was modeled after Jackie Chan himself. Another movie that influenced the design of the game was a 1972 Bruce Lee movie called Game of Death. The Devil's Temple in the game was pulled right out of this movie, where Bruce Lee's character ascended a 5-level pagoda fighting off bad guys and facing a martial arts master at the end of each floor, just like in the game. Given that the well-known Bruce Lee movie Enter the Dragon was released only a year later, I am sure some influences from that movie seeped into the game as well. The arcade game Spartan X was a huge success, especially in Japan. This led to a port of the arcade game being developed for the Famicom in Japan, and then the NES over here in North America. While I don't know if this is 100% fact or not, many articles I read cited this game as the first beat-em-up video game ever made, and I am inclined to believe those sources. The real cool part in all of this is the legendary Shigeru Miyamoto directed the NES port of Kung Fu. It was his work on this port that apparently inspired his development of Super Mario Bros., and why he chose the side-scrolling direction the game is known for today. I don't know about any of you all, but not knowing any of this going into the experience and then learning about it all for the first time is just fascinating to me. I don't normally dive too deep into the behind-the-scenes workings of some of the games we talk about, but I enjoy learning about some of the inner workings of the things we do enjoy, and learning about the people who put them all together. I'd go so far to say this absolutely enhanced my experience when I replayed this game for the show. Kung Fu on the Nintendo may not have been developed and published solely by Nintendo for the NES launch, but you can still feel a lot of that original NES DNA in it, and it's cool to see where this game originally came from. Kung Fu on the NES did go on to sell 3.5 million copies, and I am lucky enough to have one of those copies in my collection. And speaking of said copy, I can see it right over there on the shelf, and it is beckoning to me. I think this is a great time to grab that game off the shelf so you and I can experience this game firsthand. Alright, let me grab that cartridge off the shelf here. You know, one of the things I love about my retro gaming store is that they pack their NES carts in these plastic sleeves. Keeps everything super nice and super clean. There we go. And even though the cart is practically pristine, I still find myself performing the most sacred of rituals to enhance the gaming experience. Oh, yeah. After sliding our cartridge into our NES all sensual-like and gently press that power button, we're taken right to the title screen. In big bold orange letters, we see Kung Fu at the top of the screen. In the middle of the screen, we see a few options to select from before we head off on our adventure to rescue Sylvia. First, we need to decide between a one-player game or a two-player game. Playing with a pal is always fun, but you don't get to play the game together at the same time. You'll each be taking turns. If you're like me, you're probably going to be tackling this journey on your own, so we'll select one player here. But before we do, we have one more choice we have to make. Next to the one-player options are Game A and Game B. The instruction manual for the game says Game A is for beginners and Game B is for experts, but doesn't really elaborate on the specific differences. I ended up playing both game types, and from what I can tell, Game B sees more enemies on screen at once and they move around much faster, with some enemies being fairly erratic when it comes to their movement. It is absolutely the harder experience, so let's not try to chuck our NES controller through the wall too early and select one-player game A by pressing the start button. Alright, once we do that, we're taken right into the action, so get ready. On screen, we see our hero Thomas in all of his Kung Fu master glory. We can see that we're inside the Devil's Temple, and given how blue everything looks, I always assumed we could see outside, and that the wooden floor that we were on was above water for some reason. Is that how real-life pagodas operate? I don't think so, but I am also not the most educated sometimes, so let's just look at the pretty blue color and go, ooh, ah. Anyway, the words one player and one floor are on screen, but that's not the only action happening on our TV monitors. Before we begin our mission, let's quickly run through what's at the top of our screens. At the tippy top, we'll have our score. Left side is for player 1, right side is for player 2, and the high score is in the center. There was no battery backup in the Kung Fu cartridge that I know of, so the high score would reset whenever you would shut the console off. I personally never found myself chasing high scores or anything all that often, so this didn't really mean that much to me growing up. I will say, we should be shooting for as many points as we can, as early as we can, as scoring 50,000 points will earn us an extra life. Just one extra life, though. We don't get one every 50k, so keep that challenging idea in mind for now. Now, moving our eyes down a little bit to the left, we'll see two health bars. One for player and one for enemy. The player health bar is ours, and it will decrease as we take damage. Thomas is pretty tough, and he can take some serious punishment most of the time, but it goes without saying, don't run out of health or Thomas will perish. And if that happens, he certainly can't save his girl if he's lying dead on an ancient wooden floor, now can he? Now, at the end of every stage is going to be a boss that you'll need to defeat in order to move to the next floor, and when you get to them, their health bar will need to be depleted before they perish. Simple enough, right? Bosses can put up a decent fight sometimes, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Now, moving our eyes to the middle of the screen, we can see an icon representing Thomas. His hair is red here, I'm assuming, so his black hair doesn't blend in with the black background, but what's more important to note is the number next to it. This is how many lives you have in reserve in case you kick the bucket. Next to that symbol is the symbol of a dragon's head. This symbolizes how many times you've completed the game without losing all of your lives. If you are skilled enough to defeat Mr. X, the gang leader, and rescue your girl, you'll start the game over again and be able to continue accumulating points and accumulating bragging rights. The last thing on screen on the right-hand side is your total time remaining to complete the level. You have 200 seconds, or just over 3 minutes, to complete the level you're in, or else you will die from some, airborne pathogen or something, and have to start the level all over again. This is pretty standard for games around this time, so you're going to have to be quick and efficient. Alright, so that is all the stuff on screen that you need to worry about. It is time we get ready for some real action. Are you ready? Thomas makes his way to the center of the screen from the right-hand side. The word ready appears on screen, and after a moment, the level begins. We're given control of Thomas, and our mission to save Sylvia is officially underway. One thing that always threw me for a loop, though, was that you're actually moving Thomas to the left in this first stage instead of moving him to his right. Not a big deal, but it took me a moment to get my bearings, even though Thomas is starting off facing to the left. Anyway, let's get moving. We can move Thomas using the directional pad on our controller, so press and hold left. The objective of every level is to get all the way to the end, which is about as simple as you can get. There's going to be plenty of enemies trying to stop us, and one big boss at the end that we'll have to fight, so as we go, we want to make sure that we keep Thomas as healthy as possible. As soon as we start moving, we're faced with our first enemy. Clad in light blue gear with almost a magenta-looking shirt and hair for some reason, is arguably the most recognizable and the most annoying enemy in the entire game. These guys are called grippers because they will try and get close to you in order to latch onto you and hold you in place. Not only do they hold you in place, they somehow drain your health when they have you in their grasp. We definitely don't want this to happen, and the best way to prevent this from happening is to either punch these guys in the face or kick them square in the chin. Kicking an enemy is probably the most popular and effective way to dispatch your foes. Not only is this quick, Thomas's long legs give him some decent reach, keeping the grippers far enough back so they don't grab him. Speaking of, this guy is getting a little too close for comfort, so let's take him out. Pressing the B button will have Thomas throw up his best kung fu kick, so once the gripper is a little closer, go ahead and let him have it. Ha! Nice! All it takes is one hit and the gripper goes down. He gets thrown back a little and falls right off the stage, which I always thought was kinda cool looking. But don't get complacent now. Grippers usually hunt in packs, just like hyenas, so where there's one, there's bound to be more. And sure enough, here they come. Packed close together are 3 more grippers with their hands above their heads, ready to stick to us like glue. Well, we are not going to have any of that. Put that leg to use, my friend, and let him have it. Thomas will kick as quick as you press the button, so don't hold back. Good stuff. Isn't kicking people in the chin fun? Now remember, the key to each stage is to keep moving and do your best not to stand still if you can help it. Enemies are going to continue to spawn in, and it'll be easy to let yourself get overwhelmed. Oh, and make sure you watch your back too. Sometimes enemies will come at you from behind, like the one that's coming up behind you right now. Not to worry, you can turn Thomas around and take this gripper out, but instead of kicking him, let's show him the power of Thomas's fist. Throwing a punch is as easy as pressing the A button, but you'll have to keep in mind that Thomas's arms are not nearly as long as his legs, so the range of the punch is much shorter, meaning the enemy is going to have to get much closer to you for this to work. The trade-off you want to consider, though, is that a punch usually nets you more points when you defeat an enemy, so decide what the positive and negatives mean to you as you play. If you're anything like me though, you'll probably mix punches and kicks just to keep things interesting. Either way, turn around and give this guy behind us a free tooth extraction, courtesy of your fist. Haha, the dentist will see you now. Uh-oh, while we were giving this creep our attention, another gripper was coming up on us. Quick, turn around and knock this guy's lights out. Ah, damn it! The gripper throws his arms down and grabs onto Thomas. While the gripper has us in his, grip, we can't really do anything. We can't move, and we certainly can't attack. And while this is happening, our health is slowly draining away. And to make matters worse, here comes another one. As soon as the second gripper latches on, our health drains even faster. Quick, wiggle your D-pad back and forth, that'll throw him off. What are you waiting for? Hurry, before more of these guys get here. Whew, there you go. Thomas throws the grippers off him and we have control back. But not after losing a quarter of our health. I hate these guys. Anytime they grab me, they just piss me off. But you know what I feel like doing after I get pissed off? Jump kicking someone in the face. So speaking of, that's exactly what we're going to do to our next unsuspecting gripper that is heading towards us. The game affords you a surprising amount of movement options. Not only can you move left or right, you can also jump too. Now, jumping is a little weird here in that you don't press either the A or the B button to do it, since those buttons are tied to punching and kicking. You have to press up on the directional pad to make Thomas jump. He can jump in place, or if you press up and the direction that you're moving, Thomas will jump diagonally forward. It can take some getting used to and can certainly feel clunky, but once you get a feel for it, you will be even more deadly. Thomas can attack while he's in the air, so let's jump kick this guy that's coming at us. Okay, let him come just a little bit closer. Okay, now press up, and while Thomas is airborne, kick. Haha, awesome. The enemy takes your foot to the face, and would you look at that, you even got more points for your efforts. Hell yeah. Now, don't rely too heavily on this attack though. Whether you jump straight up or jump at an angle, this move is slow and you do run the risk of leaving Thomas exposed to attacks on his way down if you're not careful. Oh, and that reminds me. In the official Nintendo Player's Guide, there's a tip where if you defeat 12 enemies in a row, if you jump kick and defeat that 12th enemy, you'll get a whopping 5,000 points for your troubles. Does seem like a lot of effort in my opinion, but it is a great way to drive up your score if you're looking to secure some bragging rights against your siblings. Or if you're just looking to get that one extra life a little quicker. Alright, let's keep moving. Grippers will keep coming throughout this level and in every level, but soon we'll come across a new, even more deadlier enemy. And almost right on cue, here he comes. Clad in a white uniform and a blue vest, complete with a white headband, is the knife thrower. These enemies are a bit tougher to take down, and as the name implies, they attack Thomas by throwing knives at him. What's worse, these guys can move around, sometimes moving towards you or retreating from you. When you see one of these guys, you'll want to do your best to close the gap and take them out immediately. Grippers can still swarm you and grab you, and mobility is what you need to stay in the game here. When you do close the gap and get within striking distance, you're going to need to hit the knife throwers twice to take them out, not just once. But make sure you're careful. Depending on how fast you are, the knife thrower will more than likely toss a knife at you before you get there. Like he just did. Watch out! The knife he just tossed is heading right for your head. You can jump, but you're not going to jump high enough to jump over a knife tossed at your head. Luckily though, Thomas can duck. Press and hold the directional pad down to have Thomas duck. There you go. The knife travels over Thomas's head and you're in the clear. Keep pressing forwards towards the knife thrower. Ah crap, he just threw another one. This one though is coming at you low enough that we can actually jump over this. You can press up to jump, but a skilled player will jump forward, evading the knife and closing the distance to the enemy at the same time. I highly suggest doing this whenever you can. Okay, here comes the knife. Bam, there you go. You're in striking distance, so take this guy out. Yeah, suck on that, asshole. I have to say, as annoying as dodging those knives were, whenever you do and end up landing that killing blow, it gives you a genuine sense of satisfaction, like you really are a kung fu master. Ah, the power of video games. The rest of the level is more of the same, but at this point, we have the tools and skills we need to make it to the end. And we'll know that we've made it to the end when the end level boss appears. Looking very unique with what looks to be a billy club in his hand is the Stick Fighter. You're going to need to be on your A game in order to take this guy out, but not to worry, he's not that hard to take down. Well, once you know what it is that you need to do. Now, the one advantage this guy has over you is his reach with his stick. He can attack you standing up, or he can attack you low from a crouch. Getting hit with his stick will cause considerable damage, so in order to avoid this, I found the best strategy is to get in as close as you can and spam kicks from a crouching position. But before we do that, here is the one piece of advice that works on most bosses. When you close the gap, get in a good jump kick to the head while you're doing it. A jump kick against the Stick Fighter in particular will take away half of his health, and you'll have closed the gap when you land. At which point, you can crouch, hit him a few times in the kneecaps, and you're golden. Think you got the skills to do that now? Well then, Grasshopper, show me. Yes, fantastic display of Kung Fu, my friend. A lot of times I would find myself going toe-to-toe with a Stick Fighter when I was younger and oftentimes getting my ass beat here, but if you play aggressively like this, most of the game's bosses will go down this easily. Now don't get complacent in your victory here. The level won't finish until you continue all the way to the left-hand side of the screen and enemies will start spawning in again, so get your ass moving. The screen will stop scrolling when you know that you're close. There you go, almost there. There's a couple grippers coming up from behind you, and even though you could just end the level at this point, I think we should spare a moment and teach them the error of their gripping ways. Well done. Let's finish this level and move on to the next. When you get to the end of the level, the screen scrolls to the left and reveals a set of stairs. Thomas will automatically ascend the stairs, taking him to the next floor above. At this point, the game will calculate how much of your health is remaining, how much time you have left on the clock, and add them to your overall score. It goes without saying, but to really maximize your score, you'll want to beat the level as quickly as you can and take as little damage as possible. After this, we're taken to the next level, and it starts off just like the first level, except this time, we're moving from left to right now. 1 player, 2 floor appears on screen, and Thomas walks to the center. The word ready appears, and when it disappears, we are now in level 2. Now, level 2 is a little unique to start, and from what I remember, I never beat level 2 as a kid. It felt incredibly hard to me, and it sort of is at first. What really threw me was how this level starts out. You've been fighting human goons for the last few minutes, so you'd think that's what you'd be facing now. Well, spoiler alert, we thought wrong. As soon as the level starts, you'll see a green pot of some sort fall from the ceiling. What the hell is that? As soon as it hits the ground, out comes a green and red snake! Crap! The snake immediately slides towards Thomas and bites his leg. And that snake bite does some serious damage. We are already down to about 70% of our health. We're going to have to keep our eyes skyward as we move through this level. This will not be the last time we see these snakes, that is for sure. Speaking of keeping our eyes skyward, these snake pots, or snake baskets as the instruction manual calls them, aren't the only things that'll be falling from above. The manual says there's Dragon Balls, not to be confused with the anime, as well as confetti balls that could drop from the ceiling. Confetti balls certainly look interesting. Well, let's get moving and keep our eyes open. Ah crap, watch out! Damn, while we were standing there while I was chewing your ear off, a Dragon Ball fell right onto Thomas's head. Sorry about that, my bad. Now Thomas's health is extremely low. One more hit and we're probably done for at this point. Goes without saying, but we're gonna want to tread lightly. Alright, take a breath and let's keep moving. Oop, right up ahead, here comes another snake basket. Okay, here comes the snake. Before it gets here, here's a real quick hint. Your instincts are gonna want you to duck down and try to take the snake out with a low kick. Resist the urge. While I think you can do this, I've almost always taken damage when I try, so let us not tempt fate. Go ahead and jump over the snake. Get ready. Now. Nice! Now, keep moving forward. We don't want to stand still and let something else drop on our heads. As we move forward, another ball starts to drop from the ceiling, but it floats in midair instead of dropping to the floor. This is the confetti ball, which looks more like a disco ball to me. It starts to shake in the air, which can't be good. When this happens, we have two options. We can either jump kick the ball and take it out, or we can get the hell out of there because after a moment, that ball is going to explode and shoot out little balls in all directions. Wait, what did you say? You want to take it out? I mean, you're gonna have to position yourself perfectly here and you will not get a second chance because our health is so low. Okay, I get it. You're feeling confident. Well, alright, go ahead and take the confetti ball out. There you go. A little closer before you jump. Wait, you're too far underneath it, don't jump! And you slammed your head into the confetti ball. Great job. Don't feel bad. I do this all the time. And when I was looking back at some of the recorded gameplay footage that I had captured, I had to sigh and shake my head when I got to this point because this absolutely happened to me. While you can jump straight up and kick the ball, I usually have better luck jumping forward and kicking it on the way down to the ground. After Thomas falls off the stage, we're taken back to the start of the level to try again. The good news is, these falling pots aren't the only things in this level, we just have to keep moving past them and they'll stop falling from the skies. Be careful of the Dragon Balls, though. That's the one that fell and conked us in the head earlier. If those fall and hit the ground, they will spawn an actual dragon. If this happens, the dragon will obstruct your way for a moment before breathing fire. After which, though, it will disappear. The best thing that you can do is keep your distance when you see a dragon, or if you're very close to it, you want to make sure you duck immediately so that the fire it breathes goes right over your head. And, right on cue, here comes a Dragon Ball crashing to the floor in front of us. Alright, quick, duck! Nice, good reflexes. Just wait here for a moment and the dragon will vanish. Perfect, now let's keep moving. You'll come across your regular assortment of baddies after you get far enough along, so take them out just like you have learned how to in the last level. More enemies seem to spawn in compared to the first levels, so always try to stay on your toes and keep your fingers ready to punch and or kick at a moment's notice. Now, as a kid, I learned to get good enough to get to the end of this level, but I don't ever remember beating the boss at the end of this stage. The end boss this time is the Boomerang Fighter, and as his name implies, he uses a boomerang as his weapon. He'll throw it out just like a knife thrower tosses out a knife, but it travels slower, and when it gets so far out, it will come back. On paper, it seems easy enough to beat this chump. let him toss out the boomerang, dodge the boomerang, close the distance, and start wailing on this guy. The problem sometimes comes in the form of other enemies. Sometimes a mob of grippers would spawn, or some of them would have been chasing me from earlier, which makes balancing where the boomerang is versus where the grippers are very difficult to do. I can't count how many times I would let the grippers get too close, grab me, then I would take a boomerang to the face. And this thing dealt massive damage too, while I was being drained of my health by the grippers at the same time, so needless to say, I would meet a grisly fate here more often than I didn't. But to add insult to injury, when you die at the hands of a boss, you get to hear them laugh all evil-like at you. Ugh, what a prick. Okay, we get it, jeez. In reality though, this boss is another easy one so long as you know what you're doing. If you can close the distance and get in close, just like with the stick fighter, we can kick him in the face so he loses a large amount of health from a jump attack, then you can go low and kick at his legs and end him quickly. Super easy. Well, mostly. Of all the bosses in this game, though, only 2 of the 5 are any real threat in my opinion. There's the Black Magician on the 4th floor, and he can be a pain in the ass because he'll throw these fireballs at you, and his movements can be pretty erratic. He also has this trick where if you hit him in the head, his head will actually fall off and then reappear like some cheap parlor trick. The worst thing is that I'm pretty sure the magician takes no damage when this happens. Of all the bosses in the game, this guy, the Black Magician, killed me the most. Beyond the Black Magician, though, the very last boss of the game, Mr. X himself, can be a pain in the ass too, but at least he's pretty close to actually having a genuine kung fu fight with you. Mr. X will block a lot of your attacks and play defensive a lot, but if you wear him down, you will get the best of him. Plus, a jump kick, if you can time one just right, still does a ton of damage, even to him if you can land it. You know what, speaking of bosses, that reminds me. Here's a fun fact I didn't think to mention in the beginning when we were going over the development history. The 3rd level boss, the Giant, is pretty interesting. He looks like one of my old gym coaches, and he hits like a semi-truck. But I read somewhere that this giant was actually based on the character Kareem Abdul-Jabbar played in the Bruce Lee movie Game of Death, which I thought was really cool. Speaking of the 3rd stage, I actually feel like the 3rd stage of the game is my favorite. It's pretty straightforward with only human enemies to fight, but there's also this addition to a new enemy called Tom-Toms. Tom-Toms are basically little versions of the Gripper, and they attack Thomas by grabbing onto him in the same way. Except they're not grabbing onto Thomas up top, they're grabbing him down below, like little ankle biters, and they move fast. You have to attack them low in order to take them out, but sometimes they'll throw a wrench into that plan by sometimes doing a jump attack of their own and landing on top of Thomas's head for some damage. Now, I know I just said I like the 3rd stage, and these little bastards don't sound at all fun to deal with, and they aren't, but by the time I personally made it to stage 3, I was feeling pretty good. I was comfortable with the controls, and I was generally doing well at the game at this point. The mixture of regular-sized grippers, mini-sized tom-toms, and the occasional knife thrower just gave the stage the perfect yet fun challenge that I was looking for, and I always felt good when I completed this stage. You have to balance staying on your feet and jumping and crouching and figuring out where the enemies are and what moves are the best at that point. It's a really cool dance of sorts, and I love this stage for that. The cherry on top of this stage is the boss fight at the end because I love being able to do the same jump kick leg sweep combo on the giant and take him down quickly as well. As we start to wind it down, I have to reiterate what's already been said earlier. Kung Fu really is, even today, a fantastic pick-up and play experience that anyone is sure to have even just a little bit of fun with. The controls are simple and tight, and the gameplay premise is about as simple as you could get. While you don't have a huge moveset or anything, the ability to punch, kick, jump, and do practically a combination of all of that, even when in the air, gives the player enough of the essential tools to move forward, but offers some ways for advanced players to gain an edge if they practice enough. While Kung Fu can absolutely be classified as one of those NES tough games, and you're only really going to get good if you commit the time and practice, that should not turn anyone away from this experience. Hell, if you're really good, you can complete this game in under 5 minutes if all you do is drive towards the end of the level and you are a master at taking out enemies quickly. The fact that this game can be that short didn't take away from its overall value for me either. In fact, it added an interesting layer to the gameplay after I got done beating the game normally. I'm not one for speedrunning, really, but it was fun to see if I could be as on point and precise as I needed to be in order to get to the end of the level quickly. It was really fun, and I still find myself booting this game up just to keep my skills sharp. And even before I got to this point, it was really fun getting a little better each time I played and seeing my skills grow naturally over time. I will say, I wish there was more than one music track on offer, but what was here was just fine. Everything about the overall package is exactly as it should be. If you've never played Kung Fu on the NES before, I highly encourage you remedy that. It's a great in and out sort of experience that you'll be glad that you tried. And it's a huge part of gaming history as well. If that isn't enough to incentivize someone to give this game a try or revisit it if you've played it before, maybe the idea of jump kicking someone in the chin is just what the doctor ordered. I mean, come on. At the end of the day, who doesn't want to play the hero and rescue the girl? And with that, we've come to the end of another journey into the gaming wilderness, my friends. This has been episode 67 of the Retro Wildlands, Kung Fu for the original Nintendo Entertainment System. Thank you all very much for tuning into the show today. At the end of the day, there really wasn't much meat on this game's bone, but I had a very good time learning a few new things I didn't know about Kung Fu and re-experiencing this game as an adult. It can still be a very challenging experience, and it's one that I highly, highly recommend you try. Video games as a medium have come a very long way in the last 40 years, but there is still something inherently fun about some of the older ones. If nothing else, Kung Fu is a great testament to how amazing the original Nintendo was and still is, and how it was that this console breathed new life into the video game industry all those years ago. If you like the show today and you want to show it and myself some support, please consider subscribing to the show on your preferred podcasting platform. The Retro Wildlands continues to be a hobby for me, and I release episodes whenever I have the time to commit to writing and recording, so subscribing to the show will allow you to know the moment I drop something new. Plus, we have over 60 episodes in our back catalog, so there is plenty to listen or re-listen to. The Retro Wildlands is also part of the SuperPod Network, home of some awesome gaming podcasts and some other gaming content, so you can follow us over there at superpodnetwork.com. Other than this show, you can check out some awesome shows such as the SuperPod Saga, the Elder Trolls Gaming Podcast, Fine Time, Press B to Cancel, and more. There's blog posts, videos, and tons of other content, so be sure to check all of that out by heading over to superpodnetwork.com. Now, if you really, really like the show today and you have a few minutes to spare, I'd really appreciate it if you could leave the Retro Wildlands a good review on your podcast platform if you're able to do so. You can leave a star rating over on Spotify, but you can also leave ratings and written reviews over on iTunes, Podchaser, Podcast Addict, and Podbean, just to name a few. Good reviews will help search algorithms pick us up and spread the show around a little bit more, but more than anything, it'll let me know that you like what it is that I'm trying to do here, and it would mean the world to me if you could take a minute and let me know. But, as always, and I say this every show because I absolutely mean it, You are under no obligation to do any of this. Just the fact that you are listening to my show right now is much more than I could have ever asked for, so, above all else, thank you for being here. So, what's coming up next? I am admittedly on a bit of an NES kick lately after I started to build up my physical collection of games on that system. I've missed out on a lot of games on this system, but recently, one game specifically has been on my mind, and I was lucky enough to get my hands on it. It's one of those games that come highly recommended in some of the gaming circles I frequent, and when I saw it physically at my local retro gaming store, I just had to grab it. It's a top-down, run-and-gun style shooter, and while you're not on foot, you are in an armored jeep. From what I've seen, it looks really, really fun, so I've decided to take a chance on it, and I'm going to let you all know all about it. That being said, next time on the Retro Wildlands, we're going to be talking about Jackal on the original Nintendo. It should be a fun time, and if the feedback I've been getting is even remotely accurate, this is a game on the original Nintendo you want to experience if you haven't already. I'm very eager to get working on this one, and I hope you're able to join us when our expedition heads into the gaming wildlands once again. At least this time we won't have to walk everywhere. Until then, my friends, my name is Nomad, and you can find me roaming the Retro Wildlands.